For today's video, I'm going to be doing a comparison between all-in-one curriculum versus using sort of like, I guess you could say, broken up curriculum. Just some things to consider in order to make a decision on which route may be better for your family to take. So just a little backstory, we've been homeschooling now. We are closing out our 4th year and next year will be our 5th. And so we have been homeschooling just for a few years now. And in the beginning of our homeschool journey, we did use an all-in-one language arts curriculum. And over time, I saw that there was just some things that kind of stood out that weren't necessarily beneficial to us and working for us anymore. And so we have now, just within the last 2 years of our homeschool journey, we have moved away from using an all-in-one curriculum, and now I, specifically for language arts, make sure to break up those components. With me laying out sort of like the pros and the cons or the benefits behind the all-in-one curriculum versus a more so broken up approach to your curriculum, specifically for language arts, you'll kind of see why it was the case that I decided to eventually just move away from an all-in-one curriculum. Before I get started though, I do want to put this out there. I am not doing this comparison video to say that you should not use an all-in-one curriculum. I also am not saying that an all-in-one curriculum is how everyone should start out with their homeschool. Please keep in mind, I'm trying to keep this comparison as balanced as I can, but also still going off of our own personal experience. Okay, so I am going to be speaking specifically about all-in-one language arts curriculums because we have never primarily used anything like Gather Round, where they kind of intertwine all subjects into one curriculum. We only have used an all-in-one language arts curriculum. So that's a little background info, just so you know where I'm coming from with this information. Okay, so first up, all-in-one curriculum. A couple of the pros to using an all-in-one curriculum is, without a doubt, it is convenient. All-in-one curriculum pretty much gives you a little bit of each component to language arts right there in one curriculum. You don't necessarily have to go sifting out other resources to bring in to help bring in like spelling or writing or extra grammar, things like that, if you do not want or need to. The other thing that I noticed when we were using an all-in-one curriculum is that it definitely saved me time as far as planning goes. I barely had to do any planning when it came to using an all-in-one curriculum. And that's just because everything came right there in one book. I didn't have to plan for spelling, plan for grammar, plan for writing. I just went ahead to the next lesson. If that meant that in that lesson we only really highlighted grammar skills, then that's just what we did. It's also without a doubt that all-in-one curriculum can be more budget friendly. And this is just because of the fact that you're not going out to purchase curriculum for each of those language arts components. So you're not having to find and purchase a grammar curriculum, a spelling curriculum, a writing curriculum, phonics if you need extra phonics practice. You're not having to spend money or stretch your budget beyond purchasing that one curriculum. Now this pro, take it with a grain of salt because it depends on a lot of different factors. How many kids you're homeschooling, the type of learners they are, the type of teacher you are, the tools you guys use. It depends on many different factors. But nonetheless, I'm gonna list it as a pro anyhow, because generally speaking, I do think that this applies to when you use an all-in-one language arts curriculum. It can be less time consuming. I can say when we were using an all-in-one language arts curriculum, we were spending less time in the book as far as our book lesson portion for the day went with language arts. But now I'm going to move over and talk about the cons of an all-in-one curriculum, at least from what we experienced. And you'll see how in one aspect, some of these things did work for us to start, but then as time went on, I saw where they were no longer working for us. So the first con was that I felt like using an all-in-one curriculum was starting to produce like a jack of all trades but master of none type of thing with my oldest. So though he was getting a little bit of all of these components in one curriculum, and he was touching on all of these concepts sprinkled throughout, I started to notice that he was only learning about those concepts on a very surfacey level. For example, he may know what a pronoun is, but then he may not have really mastered by the end of that curriculum how to properly use pronouns. And that's just an example, but essentially that's how I felt we were going to end this school year had I kept on using an all-in-one language arts curriculum. So for us, that was actually the main reason why I took us away from using an all-in-one language arts curriculum and just ultimately decided to break up each component and find a resource for us to use for each one instead of going with something that was just all encompassing. Pretty much I felt like it was more so like concept introduction and a little bit of practice after it was introduced, but then it was like you know, it wasn't anything throughout to really help him master those concepts by the end of the school year. Next con for all-in-one curriculum is that pretty much you have the same approach to all components of language arts. And as I have learned over these past few years of homeschooling our oldest especially, is that you may not be able to take the same approach for each of those components. For instance, when it comes to writing, we are actually now taking the so non-traditional approach to teaching writing. We don't have any curriculum book for teaching that. For grammar, we use something that is completely black and white and traditional, Easy Grammar and Daily Grams. I actually just did a review and flip through video if you'd like to see that. And then for spelling, we are taking a complete Charlotte Mason approach to spelling. So you see how each component to language arts has, like, I'm taking a different approach to each one. It works for us. I saw a lot of growth and gaps get filled from me taking this new approach to how we are doing language arts. Whereas when we were using an all-in-one curriculum, everything was being introduced and practiced in a very traditional approach, which is fine, but it wasn't working for us. So that's why I say that that's a con. And of course, any of these pros and cons that I'm listing, you can take with a grain of salt because they do depend on other factors too. If you have a learner who, you know, they don't mind learning everything in one style, then that may work for you guys. But for us, I saw where it worked in the beginning, so it worked for us starting out with homeschooling, but it was not something that we could stick with. Speaking of learning gaps, I'm gonna list this as a con as well. When we were using an all-in-one curriculum, for me personally, it was a little harder to see where we were going to end the school year as far as skill level, because there were so many different concepts for each of those components being sprinkled throughout the curriculum. It seemed a little unorganized to me. And so it made it a little harder for me to catch those potential learning gaps. Now, this isn't to say that our kids aren't going to have any learning gaps. They're going to have some learning gaps somewhere. But for me personally, the goal is to minimize the amounts of learning gaps. And it was definitely harder for me to have a clearer picture of where we were going to end the school year skill level wise when we were using an all-in-one curriculum. And the last con that I'm going to list for an all-in-one curriculum is the fact that it just may not be as budget friendly. Now, moving over to the pros and cons for a broken up curriculum for language arts. So the first pro is the fact that you have more of an ability to really focus on each component and to really sharpen the skills in each of those areas. There's actually an increased likelihood that you won't need any extra resources or supplementation type material when you take more of a broken up approach to language arts. So it can be a little bit more budget friendly. I'm not going to say it is, because it definitely depends on the curriculum that you are choosing for each of those components. For us, it actually worked out to be around the same price when I take shipping into account for doing a broken up approach. And the last pro for a broken up approach to your curriculum is the fact that you really do have the ability to change up your teaching method for each of those components, and it be sort of like built in. So what I mean by that is when you have the all-in-one curriculum book, everything is laid out in one way. But when you are breaking things up and you're choosing a curriculum for each of those components of language arts, you can choose a Charlotte Mason style curriculum for grammar. You can choose a traditional approach for spelling. You know, you can mix it up. You can change it as needed for each component without causing yourself to have to do like so much extra planning and all of that for your lessons. Being able to really change up the approach that you take for each of those components, I feel like is definitely a pro from breaking up each of those components. Sorry about this awful glare. That's just, yeah. But I'm gonna go ahead and move over to the cons for having a broken up curriculum for language arts. So first con, it can be time consuming to plan out. Again, depends on the curriculum that you choose. You may choose something where you may not necessarily can just go to the next lesson during, you know, your next session for homeschool or whatever. So if you pick something like that, if that's how your curriculum is going to be laid out, then you probably are looking at spending a little bit more time planning. But in my humblest opinion, it is totally worth it if it is going to work better for you, your child, and your homeschool. Why not spend that extra time planning things out if it means that by the end of the school year, you can be a little bit more confident that you guys have reached your goal. All right, so I did mention budget for a pro. However, I am also going to have to list it as a con, because if you are having to purchase curriculum or resources for each component, you can probably very easily go over your budget if you have a budget. The pricing of the resources for each of those components can easily add up very quickly. So even though you may not be looking at spending more money for supplemental type resources and extra practice type things and or what have you, you could be looking at spending more money on the front end for having to purchase curriculum books for each of those components. So overall, you could be looking at the broken up approach not being the most budget friendly route to go. And the last con for as far as using a broken up approach for your language arts curriculum is the fact that it's probably not as convenient and easy to use during major life changes. So, you know, whether you're going through transitioning or any type of other big change as a family, an all-in-one curriculum probably is more convenient and easier to whip out during that time. So those are the pros and the cons for both using an all-in-one curriculum versus more so like a broken up approach. You're breaking up those language arts components and finding resources for each of them. Now here are 4 questions to consider if you are trying to decide between using an all-in-one curriculum versus breaking things up. First question, what overall approach are you wanting to take to your homeschool? Second question, what season of life are you in? 3, how many kids will you be homeschooling? And 4, what is your budget? So those are just 4 questions I think you should sort of ponder over before really making a decision about going with an all-in-one curriculum or going with the approach of breaking those components up. If you are wanting a thorough and very, very valuable website to really sift through any curriculum you can think of, whether it be all-in-one or something that's a separate component, CATHY, DUFFY. If you have not come across that website, that is a fantastic resource and, in my opinion, starting place for researching curriculum. She gives very balanced reviews on all of these curriculums. I'm going to leave that link down in the description box for you, because if you have not been on that website, I strongly recommend it. If you found this video to be helpful, valuable in any way, or you just enjoyed hearing me compare all-in-one curriculum versus taking more so of a broken up approach to a language arts curriculum, please hit the thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to hit that red subscribe button too if you aren't already subscribed. I'm so sorry again about the off lighting here. It's getting ugly. But thank you guys so much for watching.